and welcome to the CDO Magazine interview series. I am Derek Strauss with Gavroche, and we are partnering with the CDO Magazine and MIT CDO IQ Symposium and the International Society of Chief Data Officers in a series of interviews. And today I have the pleasure of talking with Peter Serenita, the Chief Data Officer of Scotiabank. Peter, welcome.
Hi, Derek. Nice to see you.
Yeah, and this is the third of our interview opportunities with you, Peter. And in the previous two, you've talked about where the CDO role came from, as well as we've gone into some of the specific current challenges and opportunities that people face in leading these kinds of initiatives in organizations, and the enormous potential that data and analytics has to really bring value to organizations. Now, in this particular interview, we're going to focus on the next frontier. We're going to look into our crystal balls and specifically into taking your perspective, Peter, as a pioneer in this area who's had the benefit of hindsight and can really look into the future and start examining in a bit more depth what's coming up on the horizon. I guess to get us started, just what ethical considerations are being given to the use of data and new technologies being deployed with financial institutions?
Yeah, thanks, Derek. This is an extremely important topic, especially in the banking industry, right? One of the things in the early banking days, right, was customer trust. People were trusting you with their money, and they had to feel comfortable. They had to trust that they would be able to get that money back,
yep.
Right? And so customer trust has always been, usually important in financial services. And now that trust extends to data, right? Not only just protecting their data, but actually, again, doing the ethical things with their data. So, so maintaining that trust is paramount to any financial institution. And the more data we have, and the more we are able to, bring data together, and the more we're able to do things with data, whether that's, again, to suggest new products to our customers, to customize products, or whatever we are going to do with that data, it's important that we have ethical principles applied to ensure that what we're doing with that data is in line with our customer expectations. And so, and that it is, I'll say, the good news on that is when data was locked in those individual silos, this was never a topic because the data was trapped. You really had no opportunity to really do anything with data other than maybe some operational processes. But now that, the data world has really advanced to provide and to make data more valuable internally to our businesses, to our customers themselves. Now this has come to the forefront of saying, okay, we now need to recognize that it's important that we are viewed as custodians of that data and that we're doing the right things with it. So at Scotia, we've developed a number of data ethics principles that we apply now to say, okay, let's apply these principles to determine, yes, this is a good use of data. This is an ethical use. This is something our customer would say, yes, I'm okay with this. And so it's really important that we have those guide rails and that we have the process to ensure that they're applied.
Yeah, I mean, data ethics has become such a big topic. I mean, you can't really go to a conference these days without having data ethics as being one of the big topics. And I think it's really caught a lot of data professionals by surprise. As you say, prior to data being kind of freed up out of the locked-in kind of scenario that we had before, where it was locked in these application systems, it was never really, something that was even on the horizon for people to get concerned about. But all of a sudden, as the data gets more and more freed up and more available, all of a sudden it's, whoa,
Absolutely.
we're going to do this ethically.
Absolutely. And I would say that the industry, again, credit the industry in recognizing that this is something important to deal with. But I also want to stress one other point here. We specifically use the words data ethics because sometimes we think of it as AI ethics.
Right.
right? But, AI ethics is just a subcomponent of that. There are a lot of other things we do with data that really aren't about analytics.
Yeah.
So we really have to make sure that we're being more holistic and say, okay, what we're using the data for, is that ethical? Is that something that the customer would be okay with? So I really want to make that point of, it's about the data in this instance.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. And Peter, you've seen the data function evolve within organizations significantly over the last decade and a half. Where do you see the industry moving over the next, say, 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, so I mean, first off, as I said in one of the earlier podcasts, I mean, the acceleration of data has been phenomenal. I mean, when you think about it, you're always so a bit self-critical. You're like, oh, we want to move faster, we want to move forward faster. When you take a step back and you say, wow, look where we came from. I
Yeah.
think, the data professionals ought to give themselves a little bit of a pat on the back to say, we're actually not doing too badly. But of course, that doesn't mean you sit on your laurels, right?
Right.
You still have to aspire to take it to the next level. And I think there's a good news story here. We've seen a huge influx of people into the data profession, right? And, for all different demographics, right? And that level of diversity, new blood, starts to give you a new way of thinking about data. So it's not just the old way, this is the way, it's tried and true. So we're really and very encouraged by the fact that, there's this influx is going to bring new ideas into the data profession, right? The other thing to think about is how data has continued to evolve to become much more front stage in terms of the customer, the business process.
Yeah.
And so think about, data was previously relegated, I'll say, and this is probably not a great word to use, relegated to a very operational process. Now, this is how I settle a trade. This is how I pay interest, but now data has been unleashed to do a lot more very interesting things, right? And you could see that in the way the data was positioned in companies, right? Originally, it was positioned under I said earlier, IT function. Then it was pulled out, and then it was positioned under a risk function. Now we've seen it move into the business function. So now the businesses are fully engaged to again, look at the customer side of things. And I think that evolution is going to continue. And again, if people a lot of times will say, where should data be? Should the CDO report to the CEO? And and I think about that a lot. And I'm not so sure that that's the final resting place of the CDO. But I do think what we're seeing is, again, moving more towards becoming a business driver. Okay. Yeah. And so while right now it sits on the business, I don't know, maybe someday in the future, think about if it truly is going to help drive the strategy of a company, does it sit under the head of strategy for the company? All right. And because, again, I think data right now plays a very supporting role. And that's very important, that it supports the business, supports the customers. But at some stage, will data actually be the strategy? Or will it really, drive the strategy? And then I think it really starts that really elevates data to the next level. And, I also think about, we also talk about data as a strategic asset. Okay. But, will someday data actually be on the balance sheet? Will it be valued so much that you're able to put a number on it? I mean, we're seeing the beginnings of that. You see data, you see company acquisitions. Some companies are acquired purely for the data that they have, the richness of the data they have. So it must be worth something, right? So I think that's what we're going to start to see, is that shift from a supporting function to actually such a driver to the strategy.
Yeah, that's certainly really interesting. And something's always fascinated me. We've talked for well over a decade about using data as an asset. And of course, an asset has a value. So, actually seeing it on the balance sheet and so on, I think is a fascinating thing that I think a lot of people have kind of glossed over when they've talked about data as an asset. And I appreciate what you just highlighted there, in terms of the future. I think we, as a group of professionals, I think that the closer we get to achieving that, I think the better, because that really cements into the fabric of the organization, the need to focus on data more and to treat it, with the respect that it deserves. So. Yeah, great conversation, Peter. Thank you so much for your insights. Really appreciate these three podcasts that we've done together, and look forward to continuing to have your input as a leader in the space of chief data officers in our community. And so thanks again for joining me today.
My pleasure, Derek.
Yeah, and for those of you who've been watching us, please continue to visit the cdomagazine.tech for additional interviews, and have a long life as a chief data officer.